Anatomy, as described in Gray Anatomy, is the field knowledge of dealing with the structure of things, or morphology, shapes or forms of things that can be seen with the human eye. Gray 6. However, form is something much more than a mental image refracted off the retina open to personal opinion. Contrary to Gray's Aristotelian view, form originates from archetype characteristics away and beyond the physical observation of its parts. 2,000 years after Aristotle's observation, mythology, humanity can only account for a small portion of the physical reality. Even with the aid of today's most sophisticated telescopes, electron microscopes, or any other visual aids, 95% of our physical reality cannot be seen. Today, astronomers have termed what cannot be seen as black matter, which represents an unknown substance that cannot be observed. Therefore, today's anatomy is restricted to a simple visual observation of what a human body looks like, ignoring what cannot be seen and the morphology of why the body looks the way it does. Truly, what people mean when they describe a visual object is the image in their own minds, not the object itself. Things look different to different people. The blind will describe things they associate them in their minds, while those blessed with good vision will describe things that are reflected in the sun rays. Certainly, the blind have some understanding of black matter, or what cannot be seen, while those with eyes to see have difficulty seeing what is actually present, perhaps blinded by the sun's own light. Using Aristotle's own logic, it follows that the blind know more about the cosmos than anyone relying on a scientific method of observation. The scientific body of knowledge is hindered by its own institutional rules of observation, eliminating any possibility of recovery or discovery of new concepts outside the visual scope. Nevertheless, traditional anatomy, or gross anatomy, is a priceless contribution to medicine, physics, or any application of the body in the material universe. Sometimes referred to the atlas or the map of the human organism, the anatomical field of study has contributed to a healthier, more fulfilling lifestyle, compounded with longer lifespan. Most importantly, all physical scientists are based on the human body as the body relates to space and time. In other words, all known laws of the physical world are in fact laws of the human body. Shape and forms of things seem to be adapted to the world which surrounds or affects a particular body. Certainly, this is true in a sense, but not necessarily. Objects are conditioned by the physics of awareness, the higher law in which all lower laws must obey. A sphere of emptiness envelops all binary relations by way of negation, limitation, or undefined schema, as all things that come to be already exist as an empty set of ideals. Figure 24. The phrase empty set represents the foundation of binary calculations rooted in emptiness. The laws of physics must obey the primordial law of emptiness. The higher law of awareness, physics responds in a mathematical way each and every time. Here now on awareness, on accord, not necessarily as it appears or as observed. Not all intellectuals take this position, and many have made good attempts explaining the physics of awareness. Although they seem to have different approaches, it matters not if we explore the inner workings of the mind as an idealist or a true materialistic path. All persistent thinkers eventually meet in the same conscious realization of this primordial substance, be it called matter or mind. This immaterialistic position, called idealism, a claim that all objects are actually ideals, makes good sense, especially when operating on multidimensional planes that are made up of those very ideals. Of course, any rational idealist would border the absurd to think it's possible to crash head-on into a concrete wall without suffering the effects of a rock-hard concrete ideal. It's equally absurd to think that there exists something other than the mind. Where would this substance come from? Idealism solves many of the problems of today's scientific separatism view, which falsely presupposes the existence of two separate worlds, the empirical outer universe and the mind. We might consider our humble beginnings as the Big Bang of consciousness no longer a subject-object relation of rocks, dust, gases, and things, but the shadows of ever-expanding awareness illuminating the dark unknown of our universe. Figure 26. Man, Visible and Invisible by Leadbeater, first published in 1898, illustrates ancient Sanskrit planes and a variety of corresponding human astral bodies, or when I am dreaming body. Leadbeater. Every possible world must also have a corresponding body, such as the human body, which operates off the physical plane, or such as the astral body of the dream world. Grade-type extraterrestrials, as previously mentioned, are synonymous with Jivatma's bodies of ancient Sanskrit texts and operate off the etheric plane referred to as etheric bodies. A simplified illustration, figure 27, represents the major planes, earth, physical, astral, etheric, and Atman's as books, one upon the other. The etheric plane is sometimes referred to as the mental plane, with a +1 characteristic illustrated as a sheath enveloping both mental and etheric planes, figure 28. Each of these universes must have corresponding bodies of awareness, or the experience of such would be impossible without the eye-ness of the inquirer. If all that is known and all that can be known are already known now, then omniscience rests within the universe of the knowable or mental plane. The universe of the mind or mental plane is nested within the etheric universe and is semi-synonymous, whereas the etheric +1 characteristic is the sheath that envelops both universes. Most grade-type encounters are experiences with Jivatma's etheric bodies, aliens from another plane. In the West, linguistic determinates force upon the memories of grade-type visitation as aliens from outer space, along with all the characteristics of Roswell era grades embedded in a Western somatic domain. Identifying grade-type aliens as Jivatmas from inner space does not exclude the millions of other life forms that may inhabit the universe of outer space. Likewise, it is a grave error to interpret Sanskrit Jivatmas as anything less than real. Profound consequences await those that have had experiences with Jivatmas, and the memories of such have been diluted by linguistic determinants associated with Hollywood etic memories. Will return as the reality of the experience cannot add on or take away from what actually did happen. The illusions are only as strong as the person who witnessed the encounter wills them to be. Some difficulties do arise if fantasy is strengthened by the ego, such as in a case of a person waking from a long, deep coma, appealing to the desires of an audience instead of reporting what did happen. Quite possibly, the reality of such experiences can be lost forever if the fantasy pays off egotistically in such a way as someone special or infamous. Spheres or influence are another way to illustrate the Sanskrit planes, such as the ancient Hebrew graphic form, the Cabala, called the Tree of Life, dating back over 2,500 years ago. Carlton, Introductory to the Cabala, depicts a hierarchy of planes as connected spheres or multidimensional powerhouses that eventually materialize life as we know it here on the earth plane. Halevi. A simpler illustration of spheres within spheres is illustrated in figure 29. These graphic spatial relations provided as figures 27 through 29, just like any other graphs or maps, enable a subject-object relation in order to understand these worlds on a human level. Most importantly, if we shift our consciousness into these areas, no explanation or graphs are needed, for we operate in these worlds by naturally moving about in them, much like a quick dip into the sea as we naturally swim about with the creatures of the aquamarine plane. Charles Burton poetically describes the higher planes as the oversoul, published in 1939, Burton. If heaven exists, and I argue that it necessarily exists, our own solar system must be nested within its heavenly properties. In contemporary literature, we lose association because our language now determines these concepts as abstract ideals. How can it be established that our solar system, including Earth, spins in abstract space, an area that can only be appreciated intellectually? Self-examination of the body, such as the legs, hands, and arms, are commonly concluded as utilities, a means for gathering provisions or a way to get from one place to another. Seldom do we think of bodily forms as reflections of human states, such as individuality, freedom, or to grasp an ideal. Human forms, as well as all objects, are shaped by our own perceptions and understanding. So it is our very understanding that opens our sleepy eyes to the archetype or why things look the way they do. Away and beyond the temporal planes exists an unconditional state of affairs the Hindu calls Atman, are accessible to travelers burdened with binary baggage of the mental world. Light travelers, bearing only Atman bodies or Atmans, find it easy and most natural to zip and skip across the endless worlds of cosmic awareness. Word associations no longer seem to link together logically as we step across the etheric threshold of timeless eternity. Here, now at a point in spacelessness, our tiny planet in the universe in which it spins nests. All things that come to be already exist as a mystical imagination of cosmic divinity. To know Atman is to awaken into a forgotten familiarity of your own understanding. As understanding propels us to the center of truth, we gain unfathomable momentum, easily overcoming the speed of light. We quickly penetrate the etheric sheath, bursting with a big bang of uniform silent stillness, awakening to a quiet world of endless horizons, stretching into the formless purity of form. Our bare feet trod the cool grass of a mystical garden that the Hebrew calls Eden, where Adam was formed in God's image, from moistened dust of this plain, archetype clay of simple shapes bored by divine ideals. Atman is the birthplace of the Atma, our own identical individualities. Set apart by experience, we know one another by way of empathy, and we are seen as shining stars, sparkling about in a cosmic sea of unconditional freedom. Atman is the birthplace of I-ness, coined the Atman by ancient Indian sages, which is synonymous with the soul body of Hebrew, Christian, and Islamic faith. When we talk about Sanskrit term Atma, we are talking about the same soul body referred to by the majority of religious beliefs. Such as creatures of the deep, Atmas take on a form or a body that is best suited for a particular plane of operation. The individual soul is marked only by the experience acquired under conditional restraints of the lower planes, the first of which is termed the etheric plane. The conditional properties of the etheric plane are the frameworks necessary to fence in the painful playground of the school of hard knocks. The Atma takes on an etheric Jivatma body like a set of clothes or costume. Jivatma is the mask of soul, the first manifestation of the archetype Atman. Properties by way of negation, limitation, or defined schema, all things that come to be already exist within the Atman consciousness. We have already established the Jivatmas and the grays represent the same entity operating off the etheric plane. This plane is often called the mental plane. Such nomenclature is helpful if we are to describe and illustrate the anatomy of the human gray body. Again, it is important to exclude, for simplicity, first-person gray bodies, which some may argue as viewing one's own self or their own etheric body. Self-recognition, perhaps self-realization of personal corresponding bodies of the individual self is outside the scope of this small work. Although when speaking of etheric plane bodies, an important note must be understood. We are describing bodies that correspond, tied together, to each human on earth, as well as innumerable alien population of the universe. All humans have etheric gray type bodies, but not all grays have human bodies. Anatomy of a human gray body illustrates what a human gray body looks like and why it looks the way it does. The illustrations in this work are derived from actual experiences with grays, offering an objective contrast comparison. Father, the illustration depicts grays that are not in every case associated with earthly human bodies. Aliens in every sense of the word, galactic, intergalactic, or multidimensional space travelers.